Hey, I'm Billy Stokes. This is my journey of building our business, but without compromising the relationships with people I love. Follow along while I document my growth. This is all BS. Okay, so, by this point, the cafe is kind of ticking along, albeit in a kind of unhealthy way, but it's barely ticking along, I would say, but we're at least in the black. We've stopped losing money and we're starting to kind of make some money. But really, our weekends offset the weekday trade. But we need to be open during the weekdays so that we would make money on the weekends and build the clientele for the weekend. So it was just this whole it was a very, very different business model and dynamic to what we were used to on Hannan Street in the hole in the wall. So. And a great team, great product. Everybody was like, love your food, love your drinks, love this, love that. Like everything was really good, but just we were still quite clunky. And we'd had a couple conversations with the owners around, hey, here's what we've noticed is our driver profitability, and we just need more foot traffic. One of the analyses we did was, okay, comparing how easy it is for others to come and get coffee. Because really, coffee was the draw card. Well, sorry, not true. Depending on the different time of day, is that some people would come through for, food at certain times. Others would come through for coffee, and you kind of upsold and complemented each other. So, but there was a direct correlation between foot traffic and especially in the events and how much we're making money and if we were making any money. And we kind of did this a bit of analysis looking at all the different steps somebody has to take from leaving their house to actually getting to a point where they're holding the coffee in their hands. So it would be like, leaving their front door, get in the car, drive. Let's just say they're going to Macca's. Drive their car, let's just say X distance. Order product, pay for product, receive product. Call it 6-7 steps. For us, it was, get in car, drive a greater distance because we're on the perimeter. Park, find a car park, get out of the car, walk the distance. Walk into the center, walk into the cafe, order, pay, receive, then leave. And we're just going it's literally twice the amount of steps that someone has to take to come to us. And so, not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, but all it is you have to, there has to be reason for someone to come, so that's fine. No problems. We just have to make sure we're giving people really, really good reason to come to us. And so what happened was we got to a point where we were going, well, you know what, we have to make sure that our brand and our offering and our delivery and our consistency is so consistent that people don't mind putting that effort in, and it becomes a destination cafe. And we were getting there. We were getting there, and we were kind of just in the black. And so we had sat down with them and we just said, hey, here's what we're not seeing. The image that was painted to us really hasn't eventuated, and that's kind of when we started having these conversations. That's when we realized that the point man that I'd been dealing with hadn't really communicated the reality of the situation, or the reality of where the center was at and what was going on. And so we were, there was certainly a disconnect between the image painted and what was actually happening behind the scenes. So it made it difficult for us to because then we realized, the other owners who were still in the deal or still in the ownership of the building, they were like, well, I'm really sorry that's the image you got told, or the image that was painted to you. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So we were able to have some, kind of realize, okay, well, this is where the reality is. It's not what we thought it was going to be. And what do we do now? And that's kind of where we said to them, hey, here's our data. Here's our sales data. Here's our traffic data. Here's what we know for sure. Here's the dates. Here's what was happening on those dates. These are the days we made money. These are the days we didn't. And the direct correlation was the fact that there was either an event or a reason for people to come, which then increased the foot traffic. And, and for what we were paying, man, gosh, what we were paying in rent was so exorbitant. But and this is the caveat to that, is it was expensive, but it wouldn't have been expensive had that centre been full. So, and that, I think that was part of the vision that was painted, was like, okay, this is going to be a really thriving, hustling, bustling, and I was like, yeah, totally. Like, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this vision, and and yeah, so we got to the point where we're just going like, okay, well, you know what, we're going to either something has to change or we have to leave. Those are our two choices, and so we said to them, we're like, okay, listen, these are because we want to start tying in some terms, around the center performance and ours, and I was willing to do things like, I'm happy to pay a percentage of revenue, agreed revenue, based on the business, and they can have full access to our books and all these sorts of things. And it's very much like, well, that's not how this sort of setup works. And for those who are familiar with Melbourne, you'd know Chadstone, and we know people who used to be in management at Chadstone, and I know that that's how those deals can work. So we were just like, well, like it just seemed to be up against a wall constantly, and we just said to them, we're like, well, we need a lease, and that's when they went, well, you've already got your lease, and I said, well, no, we've signed a letter of intent, not a lease. And in my naivety, I didn't realize that was such a strong position that we had, was that we weren't, like, we had a lease, so we didn't have a lease. So that's when I was like, right, well, you know what, these things need to change, otherwise I have to pack up. And then realizing that, you know what, there's nothing stopping us from doing that now. Whereas, yeah, and so I went to him, I was just like, hey, listen, unless things change, then we're going to pack up and leave. And they were still, I don't know if they thought that we were bluffing. Who knows? I really don't. But in the end, we ended up packing up and leaving. And unfortunately, this is just an unfortunate circumstance, was that I was reading through my emails later, because I've got an administrator who goes through and curates my emails for us. And this is probably about 6 months after we packed up and left. And I saw there was an email from the owners who said, well, hey, listen, if we did this promotion, would you stay? Or if we did this and this and this? And I didn't reply to it because I didn't even see it there. It wasn't until like 6 months later that I went through and saw this attempted communication from them that I it didn't even make it to my inbox. Well, it did make it to my inbox, sorry. I wasn't even aware of it. And that was disappointing. I was pretty disappointed in myself for that. Because, it ended up being a $90,000 mistake. A $90,000 learning experience, let's call it that. Where, would I have done it again? I probably would have. Had I known what I know now, I would have put a lot more parameters around the lease. Yeah, I wouldn't have taken the deal had there not been the terms that I wanted in the lease. That's probably what I would have done different. So yeah, so anyway, so that's so we're about 12 months in, give or take. I can't remember the exact time. I know it was under 12 months or just over or something. And that 12 months, oh my God, that flew past. That went so fast. And the other thing as well is that the guy that we bought the cafe off, there was a few things that, weren't really what he said they were. Classic, isn't it? Yeah, so anyway, so there we were. So, and again, like the biggest issue was that we grew the business by way of abdication rather than systemization, and realizing that was a huge mistake on our part. He's getting to the point of waking up, so we might hear a baby crying very, very soon. So so that was the I guess the mistake that we made in there, was that we didn't really know what we were doing. Obviously, knowing a lot more about leases now, like, God damn, I know a lot about leases now. And and I think that with respect to like learning, like, would I still want the learning from it? Yes. Would I want to do it that way again? Probably not. Do I think there's another way to have learned the depth of what we know now without doing that? I don't know. I think that you rise to the occasion. I think that forcing functions is such an important part of growth, and that was a huge forcing function for us. So yeah. So anyway, so here we're faced with the decision of going like, what do we do? And those we borrowed money from to start the business, we went to them and we were just going like, hey, we're talking to a couple of them, just going, well, what do we do here? And they just said to us flat out, they were just like, listen, cut your losses, like not even from a financial standpoint, just purely from like a mental energy and and focus standpoint, cut your losses and call it a day. So we did. Yeah, is that we said, you know what, like we're going to consolidate our focus, really start make like really grow the business. And sorry, when I say grow the business, I mean like grow the internal systemizations in the business and make it work. So yeah, so in 12 months we it was crazy. We started the business, bought another business. Sorry, inside 18 months. Sorry, we started a business, bought the business. Yeah, packed everything up, and yeah, and we closed the business inside 18 months. Oh gosh, it's crazy. Yeah, pretty. I wouldn't necessarily say reckless in hindsight, but yeah, and definitely the level of communication that I would use now would be very very different. I look back and I think I probably could have communicated a lot better with the owners around really where we were at. And one of the mistakes I definitely made was that when I started getting discontent with the pace of how things were moving, because we thought things were going to move a lot quicker, is that I would have started communicating that earlier on. And I know one of the things that was really difficult was that we've got the guys who are working in the cafe. They were starting to get really frustrated and really like really, yeah, just really frustrated with how things were headed, because it wasn't, like I'm getting told this vision, I'm sharing the vision down to the rest of the team, and then and they're keen, like so excited, like yeah, this is going to be amazing, and then it just consistently is just not happening. And so then they started building a bit of resentment toward I guess the rest of the operation. So then trying to be this middleman at the same time, and it was messy. Hey, it was messy. So I think for the most part we're all pretty relieved. And I remember, going in, and I love that place, man. It was a lot of fun. Like hospitality is fun. Yeah, it's messy, but fun. So I remember sitting in there. We've packed up one day, and I know that I have to make the public announcement on our socials. And one thing, and this is one thing that I hate, and I use that word in context. I hate when business owners close and then they're like, "Oh, the community didn't support us." You're not a charity. You're not a non-for-profit. You are there to make money. Like if you made millions of dollars, you wouldn't be you wouldn't just donate it to charity. Like no one's there to try and to support the cause of what you know. You're there because you've got a vision for your life and a passion, and you best be delivering value to the people who are going to be paying your business for your services. And so I was very very intentional about when we announced it, and we said to everybody when we got on socials. So we might have a crying baby in a second. When we got on socials, and I announced it, I was very very intentional about making sure that I didn't point this to anyone, and that it was about us. We read the play wrong, and we made a mistake. We grew too quick, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but I remember that. And yeah, so it was certainly interesting. Yeah, it was a very interesting time. So yeah, so there we are. We are at the point where our business has retreated back to just being the one spot. So in 18 months, we launched, we had great success when we launched, we were onto something, and then we expanded, and we expanded too quick, and we didn't know what we were doing, and I didn't clarify what we needed to clarify. At the time, I'll be honest, I didn't really know what I should have been clarifying anyway. We didn't know how to actually run, multiple systems, and just all these sorts of things, and just realizing well, not at the time. I look back now and I just go, God, it's so obvious. But at the time, we were just like, oh, well, it didn't work out, whatever. And we thought that it was, I was just the center, and that's part of it for sure. It's not the whole story. It's a small portion of the story, a very, very small portion of the story. Yeah. So there we go. So we are back at a point where we are back to Hannan Street, where it's just us again, and this is the really interesting part, right? So we bought it in August 2021. Here's the photo. The cafe used to be called Bliss, and I'm holding a few stacks of cash, and on my way to buy Bliss, and that was August 2021, and then. So then, May 2022, that's when I've got this photo, but when was this? March 2022. Yeah, so I'd say about 12 months later, so April, March. This is the most interesting thing, hey, and you just never know, and I know I've said this in the previous talks, but you just never really know what's going to happen. So it's about 12 months. We close the cafe, we move everything into a shipping container, we park it out of my in-laws' place just so we've got everything there, and it's just sitting there. And then, just as fate would have it, we started literally about a month after we closed the cafe. We got word that Zarafas, which is a drive-in location right next to KFC and McDonald's and one of the main roads, that Zarafas were closing shop. So I was like, interesting. And I knew that because we've just gone through the experience of not being able to run two locations well, we've just gone, okay, well, you know what? We need to... here's an opportunity. It's a golden opportunity. Everybody knew it. Everybody knows it. But no one else had access. So purely just through our networks is that my sister knew the chick who knew the manager. So we got in touch with them and we said, hey, you guys are closing up. We'd like to speak to someone about the property. Got in touch with the regional manager. She handballed us up to the lady who was dealing with the property. And we just said, hey, we're just curious, what's going on here? And she straight out, she was like, listen, don't want to sell it to anyone. we don't want to rent it. We only want to sell. And I was like, well, lucky for you, I only want to buy. But bearing in mind, by this time, we made 180 grand on our property. Okay, we had to use a little bit more of that when we moved into our new place, because it was a little bit more expensive, but not by much. So we did that. Then we also used the money to float our cost of living while we were getting the business going. Then we also used some of the money to buy the cafe. And then we also used the money to buy the equipment and to the changes. And so by the time everything's said and done, we're down 90 grand. That's how much the cafe cost us. And all these other things, all this crazy stuff. So here we are, where at this point we've just reconsolidated down to just the 10 square meter hole in the wall coffee shop again, and we're at this position where we're just going well, if we're going to make the most of this opportunity, we actually have to move. We can't start another location. We don't have the capital. We have to move. But we've also got a lot of the equipment there from the cafe. So it's kind of like this synergy that was going to work pretty well because, okay, well, sure, we're down 90 grand, but we still do have the equipment. Okay, so we've got this equipment. We've got the second coffee machine because we had the cafe. So we've got the two coffee machines there. It's a dual window coffee drive-through. And looking at all these different things, and the biggest issue was that we didn't have money to buy the premises with. We don't have it anymore. So here we are. We're back at the same spot we were when we wanted to start the business. And we didn't have the money. We had the vision, we had the dream, we didn't have the money. Luckily, by now, though, we do have some runs on the board. So we've got a business that's making money. So it's not profitable by way of a taxable position, but profitable by way of a cash flow position. And we're in this spot where we're actually making money in the business, where we're able to draw a wage, and we're able to actually get paid from the business, which is really great. So at this point where we're going, okay, like we've got a brand, we've got the skills, this opportunity that we were trying to find for minimizing the opportunity cost loss by not being able to action food because Beck is an incredible chef. Well, now we can be in there, and now there's a spot where we can do the coffee and do the cold drinks and do the food, and it's in a prime location. The issue was we just had to work out how the hell are we going to buy this thing. And here's the other interesting part: is had we not made the decision to cut our losses, like sunk cost fallacy is such a big thing, hey, and part of it is like, well, I've already lost 90 grand. Well, I might as well just stick it out and try and turn it around. Like that's how casinos make money, and so we were at this point. We're just like, well, we have to cut our losses on the cafe, so we did. Had we not done that, we wouldn't have the capacity, we wouldn't have the focus, we wouldn't have had anything to actually be able to action this opportunity that was in our hands. So here we are. Like, very, very interestingly, that was exactly what we needed to be able to actually do the thing. It was so incredible. So by closing the cafe, we actually were in a position to be able to really action this opportunity that was a golden opportunity. So we started the conversation with them. We started talking, and this was, I think it was just May, I said, and they said to us, hey, like, we're not interested in renting, we want to sell. And I was like, okay, cool. So then what I did, so, after a month, we've just cleaned everything up, Zach's gone and got another job and he's doing well there. And the key personnel that we could keep came and worked with us on Hannan Street, and it was really nice. We went back to this point where we were just like, okay, it's just easy again. And then and the interesting part about just having that was that, like, even with the cafe, like, it was just at the point where we individually, I could, or Beck could, and Beck was pretty pregnant at this time, we could very easily shoulder the burden of inefficiencies or, staff incompetency or anything like that. Like, we could do it ourselves. But the problem was, like, we were bound to it forever. Like, there was no opportunity to go take family time off. Or, if one of us got crook, man, you pop a heap of painkillers and you go to work. So things like that. And the other thing as well, bear in mind, this is all in the middle of COVID, right? So this is gnarly still. Like, it's crazy, dude. And that was a whole thing, dude. Like, COVID was gnarly. Hey, like, let's park the expansion conversation for a second, because we'll touch on COVID. I absolutely hated how the government went about it. I lost a lot of trust in a lot of people. And, COVID was so divisive. So divisive. I mean, I'm not going to get into a political conversation on a public platform or anything like that, but I would have rather lost our business than continued to go down the path of and that's a big call. That's a big call. And I mean it. I would have rather lost my business than going down the path of blind compliance with stuff that just doesn't make sense. All the data that we were looking at, and we know some friends of ours in the medical system hung up their coats permanently because they were just like, hey, like, and they would be like, hey, like, here's what we're seeing. It's not good. And the thing is, like, I can't blame people either. Like, our we were pretty keen to fight back on it. Yeah, COVID was crazy. We were pretty keen to fight back on it, and our lawyer was just like, Billy, pick your battles. And I was like, this is a battle I'm actually happy to fight. You know, like, and I know that typically it's the little man's going to be the one that loses, but it's something that I was willing to fight against, and Beck and I had to have a serious conversation where we were just like, do we, like, worst case scenario? I was like, worst case scenario, I operate equipment. I swing a hammer. I can pick up a camera and go back to photography. Like, hospitality isn't it. Like, that we're not bound to this. From a completely selfish standpoint, by being able to look at all our options and go, you know what, we don't. You know what? If we get fined, if we get this, so be it. But so we took the stance that we wouldn't get jabbed. Super controversial. We decided not to. Obviously, being very early in the piece, being a very public-facing business, we didn't make that wildly public. What we didn't do, we didn't demand that our staff got jabbed. We just inquired. Hey, have you guys got your jabs? If you do, can you send us the information? This is where it gets pretty hectic. One of our girls who was working with us, this is a whole story. It did not pan out well. She ended up, it was gnarly. And long story short, when we ended up getting rid of her, I was just like, hey man, like, this isn't a thing. And she was just intentionally malicious toward the business, and toward us. And this is the crazy part, is because we didn't come down on a ton of bricks on one of the other staff, and because there were a few other things, and it was a whole mess, man. It was a massive mess. But because of that, there was this offense, and which built into resentment, and I that whole thing, like, trying to take ownership, and and I kept trying to, like, trying to problem solve with her, but she had already checked out. I should have just got rid of her. Anyway, long story short, she ran straight to the healthies. It was just like, these guys aren't jabbed and all these sorts of things, and rah rah rah. And we were like, oh, and there were a couple guys in our team would drag it out as long as possible, would wait till like the very, very day before they had to get jabbed to go get jabbed, just to, in hope that the rules would change. So listen, we sacked ourselves from the business. We stopped working in the business, all these sorts of things, and we were willing to have our team stand behind us and would take the brunt. And I remember, we had the CHO email us and just be like, you need to provide evidence of, everybody's vaccination status. And by that time, we were speaking with lawyers over East, and we wrote them this letter back, and we were just like, hey, like, part of my duty of care is I can't remember exactly the right terminology. Sent it back to them, and we were just like, no, like, we're not going to. And then they went quiet. We just kept pushing back. We refused to, and that's crazy, because we were just like, we don't know how it's going to pan out. Like, we don't know. And I mean, what my biggest issue with all of it was this totalitarian approach, where it's like, do this or else you lose everything. And I'm like, yeah. Anyway, it can very, very easily turn into a political conversation. My biggest issue is I didn't trust the speed with which, and if you follow the money, a lot of people in politics got very, very rich off COVID. I don't trust it. It certainly disenchanted a lot of, like, to me, I lost a lot of faith in Australian political leaders. I have boundaries for where I involve the medical system in my life now, and how I understand the medical system is that they are incredibly good at keeping people who are meant to be dying alive. That is black magic. They're genuinely there's a human being who's meant to be dying and they don't. That is genuine magic. The medical system isn't very good at keeping people or stopping people from getting to the point where they are dying in the first place. Like, they're not good at dealing with chronic illness. And, and the more that I learn and the more I speak with people and the more I read and, read papers and that, you just realize that, and I say this with all best intentions, because I'm sure there's a lot of doctors on here, and I don't want to, and again, like I said, I don't want to start a political debate, but, like, I'm a good friend of ours. He's a medical director, actually. How's that? Okay, so, like, he literally runs hospitals. The man has, like, degrees coming out his ass, and I was talking to him around wanting to go to university to understand, like, organizational psych, and he said, well, do you want to think like an organizational psychologist? I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, university teaches you to think like that profession. And in that process, you become dogmatic, which is good for that, but you've got a depth of understanding, not a breadth. And especially unless you've got a breadth of experience, the depth creates dogma, and so this is him explaining all this to us. And I'm going, oh, okay. And so now, like, I look at, it's actually interesting being a generalist. As a business owner, you're a generalist, not a specialist, right? And, so you learn a little bit about accounting and a little bit about law. And then, you work with your accountants and lawyers and you realize that, oh, the lawyer actually doesn't understand this part about accounting and finances. And also, you realize that the accountant doesn't understand that about law, but you're in the middle and you understand a little bit about both, which I think is really important. And I find when I speak to a lot of people who've just spent their entire lives in one industry and with one skill set, is that they're quite dogmatic and just going, this is how it is. Yeah, but it's not. And there's a great book called The Island of Knowledge, and he talks about how, like, what we know to be true is so, like, that term is so versatile. And Newton's understanding about science was absolute, irrefutable, until Einstein refuted it. And Einstein's, laws of relativity, or whatever it is, I can't remember his thing, was undermined by Hawking. And now Hawking's absolute truths that he, discovered are now being undermined. And that's the nature of everything. And so that was kind of my stance, was I didn't trust the fact that it just smelt fishy. Everything smelt fishy. And it wasn't just me either. Like, it was such an incredibly divisive time in the entire world, not just Australia. And it was one of those things I was like, yeah, until I see how things work out in the wash, I'm not willing to, one, put myself through that, much less demand that everybody does this. And anyway, so we ended up having to push back from the healthies multiple times, where they would come through demanding, this and this. And then I remember this is just before, like, gosh, it was so close. Just before everything really started to quieten down and they relaxed all the laws. I sent them back the same letter that I sent them the first time, probably maybe 6 months apart, and this time they came back with proof. I was like, show me where, So I went through and I read the acts, and with respect to the diligence sides of things, I went through and I read all the acts and I read the laws and I understood I tried to find all the holes that I could, and I said, show me where, and they came back and they said, this is where. And then I was like, oh, so I was postponing. I was speaking with this lawyer over east and all these sorts of things, and yeah. And in the end, I and just for context as well, like, it wasn't just because I wanted to be like, if the police. Like, I've had heart palpitations my entire life. My great grandfather died at my grandfather died at great or whatever. Who cares? In his 50s. My mum's had it. So, like, heart things is something that I'm not blind to. So, I know people personally who were all good, got jabbed, and now, part of their hearts are dying. Yeah, and these are people who, there's this one person in particular, her partner, she's been in the medical industry and for quite some time. He went and got jabbed, got the full suite, and now he has a very finite lifespan with only a few years left. And even speaking with her, she's just like, I regret it. And so that's where I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry. Like, I have more ownership, so I have more responsibility to my wife and the children I'm bringing to this world and the commitments I've made to the people that have invested in our business than I do to a totalitarian approach of compliance. And I just hated it. So that was something we really drew the line on, and I refused to move. And I was willing to lose everything and have another go, because I think as well, like, we realized that it's not that hard. It's not that hard to get traction. It's not that hard to actually build a good quality product that people appreciate and love. So that was where we were just like, all right, well, we're going to put our foot down on this. Yeah. Anyway, so let's pick up with Zarafas. That's the end of that conversation. Politically spicy one.